Welcome to LOA Today. Walt Thiessen and life coach Tom Wells here. Today is Monday, July the 30th, 2018, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Your first daily dose of happiness for the day and for the week. And we're off to a good start here, at least in Connecticut we are. We're experiencing a really nice patch of weather. I mean, just, you know, the kind of weather where you wake up, it's like late 60s, upper 60s, lower 70s, and it's dry and it's clear and everything's green and blue and yellow and all the beautiful colors are out. My favorite kind of weather. So I mean, I know I mention weather a lot, but I really like this weather.
When you said, I thought you said late 60s, and I was picturing it's like it was in the late 1960s.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I didn't quite phrase that
Pictured
one right,
people in Volkswagen Bugs and Volkswagen buses driving all around.
Flower power and all that.
Everybody's happy. There is no such thing as craziness. No, I'm kidding.
I don't know. There's plenty of craziness, if I remember correctly, about that
Yeah,
period.
there was, definitely.
But that's all right. So we're off to a good start for this week. This is a good day.
Yeah.
So how are you doing, Tom? I mean, how was your weekend?
Well, it was good. You know, I had some times where I felt connected to Source and some times where I didn't feel connected. And so I decided that that's what I wanted to talk about today in today's podcast. You know, how do you be unconditionally connected to Source in a relationship? Because I was with my partner a good part of the weekend, and it's really interesting to see going in and out of conditional and unconditional love, you might say, or being in that place where you're feeling really good or that place where you're feeling stretched by conditions.
It's interesting that you described, you kind of equated Source with love, which I agree. I think it's an excellent correlation. But unconditional or conditional source energy, I hadn't heard it that way. But it makes sense once you think about what the words mean. But conditional source versus unconditional source. Okay, well, that's different.
Well, maybe that's not a good way to put it. But I guess Source is always there. That's for sure. And if something is happening, the solution to that conditional thing is happening right there at the same time that the so-called conditional problem is happening. The source, the solution's taking shape, but the only way I guess that I see it is when I'm in a place of feeling the unconditional.
Right. Yeah. When you're in the alignment, as Abraham likes to call it.
In alignment. Yeah.
Yeah. Because when we're not in alignment, then I like the way they express it. They say essentially, we're disagreeing with our inner being. We're having an argument with ourselves. And when we're in that place, that's conditional. And that's true. It really is true.
Yeah. Yeah. It's to me, I find this whole arena to be kind of like crazy making to my mind, which in a way makes sense because the mind maybe can't really grasp what this idea of unconditional means, you know, because always with our senses, we're perceiving conditions and then we're looking for environments that are pleasing. At least I am. I'm looking for conditions that come into my eyes and ears and all my senses that are pleasing to me. And when conditions are unpleasing, then I feel like I don't have the life I want to have. And then I want to tweak the conditions or freak out about the conditions because they're not the way I want them to be. And really the whole thing is that the conditions need to be irrelevant to me. And what needs to be relevant is my inner connection. Not that the conditions don't matter, but that the conditions are going to line up the way I want them to when I'm connected first to Source. I'm feeling that connection of, you know, alignment.
No, I hear you. And in fact, for me, it's also, I mean, when we live life, we experience it as a series of conditions. And it seems like the conditions happen to us. The teachings that we learn about how the law of attraction works and deliberate creation and the art of allowing and all that stuff, that teaching basically says the feeling and the thought comes first and then the conditions show up, which is contrary to the way we feel like we experience it. So on the one hand, as you're describing the conditions of life, I think to myself, well, yeah, but I'm actually trying to learn how to create the conditions, not just to wait for the conditions to show up. And that's kind of it's not really it's a contrast. It's also a bit of a paradox. You know, which comes first, chicken or the egg?
Yeah, yeah. And so what to do about that in any given moment in one's life when, it seems like we're dependent on the conditions and we're trying to change the conditions to make our life more pleasant. It's like the example of the world we live in. It's how much of the time are we trying to get our house to be just right, and our car to be just right, and our food to be just right, and everything, and our partner, our friends, how can we have everything be just the way we want them conditionally? And I think I've spent a lot of time focusing on conditions. Sometimes I don't even realize. I mean, it's so normal and natural in a sense in my life to be, I think, trying to tweak conditions, and then to realize that, no, the real place that all this is coming from is my relationship to my inner being. This is all an inner game.
Or it's an inside job, as they often say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The idea of being conditional and thinking conditionally, that idea is, well, it's not only our biggest challenge, it's ever present. So, and I think that's why it's so difficult to, at least at first and even over time, completely accept the idea that we're creating the conditions with our minds, and that we're creating it with our, like you said, when we're in agreement with the inner being, the rest of us, the other side of us, the non-physical side of us. When we're in agreement with that, that's when we're doing our best creation. And when we're not in agreement, that's when we're not doing our best creation, or maybe miscreating or creating stuff that we really despise.
Yeah.
But even with all that knowledge, it still seems like the creations just happened to us. That's the part that really is, for me anyway, that's my biggest challenge, trying to remind myself, I'm the creator of it. I'm the creator. I keep creating this stuff. Now, if I don't like what I'm creating, stop playing with the ball of clay that way.
Exactly. Yeah. I was looking at this thing from Abraham where they're saying if you're with a person who's in your life, first of all, that person only showed up because of the law of attraction. That person is there because there's a divine invitation to them to be in your life, and it's for both unconditional reasons and conditional reasons. In my mind, anyway, it's like there they are mirroring the stuff that I'm really projecting. They couldn't be there, and they couldn't be saying and doing and appearing the way they are appearing if they weren't a manifestation of my vibration. And some aspect of my vibration is allowing that person to be there in front of me. And so anything that I'm like externalizing onto them is really something that is in my vibration. And so that's where I need to deal with it. And it's amazing to realize that everything I want in that relationship is going to be affected by how I tune my vibration.
Well, plus the way you phrased it, I mean, you were writing about relationships and relationship love, but we said, can we ever find love when we are focused on improving or tweaking or freaking out about conditions? And that phrase, take out finding love and replace it with attracting anything. I don't care, fill in the blank. And can we fill in the blank when we are focused, or attract fill in the blank when we are focused on improving or tweaking or freaking out about conditions? The question almost answers itself at that point, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah, but go ahead.
No, well, because clearly all the tweaking does is focus on the conditions, and that's the thing. That here we are human beings who constantly focus on conditions. That's kind of the way we're built to act. And yet we know the one thing we can't do if we want to be the most deliberate creators possible is to not focus on the conditions. It's kind of like it's like a dirty trick, really, when you think about it, right?
Or it's or if it's a divine blessing.
Well, depending on exactly on how you look at it, but one way or another, it's like your entire being is totally. It's like your head is in a lock, right? And it's locked in position. It can't look anywhere else. And your eyes are locked in position. They aren't allowed to look anywhere else. And you're always expected to look at those conditions and then say, okay, I'm ignoring the conditions.
Yes, exactly. And how the heck, when the conditions aren't what we want, are we supposed to then find a way to not care? I mean, if you're going through a whole lot of pain in your body, but that if you would get your emotions off how much you think you're suffering and put your emotions on the fact that things could get better, the pain could diminish, that this could change, and you get yourself more and more into this place where you're just less focused on your freak out about it, and you're more focused on hope that, hey, I hope, I believe this could change. That's how you open the door to the pain becoming less. And
well, not just to the pain becoming less, but to the manifestations you want becoming more. It's both.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, if everything's coming from source, and source is only in this place of perfection, then, and we're lining up with this place of perfection, and everything, and that's literally our vortex, and everything we want in a relationship, in our health, in our career, it's all going to come from this place where we get lined up with our higher self, with our inner being. And that's when everything flows from our vortex, and we do start having more and more conditions that we want in our life.
And I've noticed too that as my own ability to get myself into that alignment, get myself into that better feeling place, and to stay there more often, as I do that, I mean, it's very clear to me, good stuff starts to happen when you do that. When I do that, that's when interesting, all kinds of cool stuff happens that very often leads to the things that I want happening in my life to happen. Mm-hmm. And nevertheless, despite that fact, there's also the doubt side. The doubt side that, well, I'm not really sure it's going to work out. I'm not really sure it's going to play out the way I want it to. Mm-hmm. And then there's also the side of, well, when you get yourself into alignment, it also just feels good, And so how much time am I just kind of spending time feeling good and, okay, I'm not worrying about the particular results that come. I'm just focusing on the feeling good part. And what role does that play in breaking my attachment, my fascination with what is? Mm-hmm. And I think what I've been finding is, I mean, I haven't really gotten to the point where I do this regularly, where it's like, day in, day out, all day long. But I think what happens is, as we get more and more familiar, more and more experienced with, more and more exposed to being in that feel-good place, not only does it become easier to stay there, but it also becomes clearer how the process works.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure. We learn that there's a way to be more and more connected to source. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that we're not only are we more and more connected to source, but I think the biggest problem we all have, I mean, we're just talking about how you get so focused. It's almost like we have our heads locked in place and our eyes are locked in place, and we're not allowed to move. We get so focused on the what is and expecting events to happen to us rather than being the creator of it, that it takes a lot to shift away from that viewpoint, from that belief, because that is a belief, really. And in the process of getting into the aligned position, in the process of getting into that good feeling place, I think what happens over time, as we succeed in doing so longer and longer and more consistently, it somehow becomes more obvious to us that the reverse proposition is true, that in fact we do create, that in fact it isn't the events happening to us, it isn't the experiences happening to us, but we are, in a sense, happening to the experiences. We are making the experiences happen. We are making the events happen, and we're doing it by changing our focus. I think what happens is we learn to believe that the opposite, the one thing we couldn't possibly dare to believe is true, that thing really is true, that we really are in control. We're learning our own control the more that we're in alignment.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was checking out some Abraham things on this, and they were saying that one big key to everything is to make the external things irrelevant and to really, take this charge we have on the external thing, the condition, the conditional thing needing to make us happy, needing to be our source of happiness. And we make it less and less relevant, and we make this basic alignment with source the most relevant thing, and the only truly relevant thing to us is this alignment with source. And one thing they were saying is because there is no such thing as conditional love. It doesn't actually exist. You can't get anything from having your car be perfect. You can't get anything from having your mate be perfect. You can't get anything from constantly having your, making your health perfect. In terms of what we really need and what really life is, it only really comes from this connection to source. Everything is flowing from that. And because it's so hard for me not to just always be, as we said, looking at conditions. And, when I see a little tiny dent in my car, it's like, oh, dang, it's like something's changed in my perfect condition.
No. It's not, oh, dang. It's, oh, ding. It got dinged.
You had to say that.
I just had to. I'm sorry.
No, that's good. I'm glad you did. Keep it lighthearted, Walt.
That's right. Well, keeping it lighthearted is really the secret to the whole thing.
That's what I like. Yeah, that's the condition. If I don't have that condition, I'm not happy.
It's funny though. I mean, I like your point that there's really no such thing as conditional love. It doesn't really exist.
Yeah, when I was thinking about that, it was like
it really doesn't.
Yeah.
we like to talk about it, right? That's fairly popular these days. It's one of those pop psychology things, right? Conditional love.
Yeah. I was thinking of it in terms of like a relationship, and there's these myths out there in the world of psychology, the world of relationships, that say all these different things like, oh, well, there's going to be the honeymoon period and you're going to meet this person, and there'll be this period of time where you guys are the other person can't do anything wrong and you're in love, and even the lovemaking is fantastic. Everything, is great. And then, time goes on and, you start to realize, this person has flaws and their feet are made of clay. They don't walk on water. And, and it's like, and then I even was reading this thing the other day that says, you'll start making love with your lover and, a good relationship, and then it'll be really great. And then eventually it'll be less and less, good. And pretty soon she'll be saying, I've got a headache tonight and let's not make love. And, and I'm thinking all of that is conditional love. All of that is the setup that, you're basically relying on conditions to make you happy, and what they're saying is you're not in control at all of whether or not you're going to keep that love alive. Well, I don't know if they're saying that, but they're saying that.
Well, it certainly leans that way.
Yeah, that these are just the natural patterns, but it's scary to me because it makes me feel like I don't want to succumb to not having my relationship be exciting every time I meet my partner, not having there be an unlimited potential of making love and have it be something that's constantly expanding. I don't want to be a being who's just looking at how things are not going to work out the way I want them to. I want to look at it the other way.
Well, it's interesting too, because you used the word perfect, right? You described perfect love, perfect sex, perfect people, perfect events, perfect, And I remember there was a line from the movie Seabiscuit about the horse that was this racehorse in the 1930s that captured the attention of the nation and ended up running a match race against the Triple Crown winner, who was a descendant of Man o' War. The Triple Crown winner was War Admiral, and beat War Admiral in the match race, and just really just captured the imagination of an entire population that was exhausted by the Great Depression and really needed a feeling of hope and possibility, and that's what they saw in this horse. Well, in the movie version, Jeff Bridges plays the owner of the horse, and one of his lines at one point, he's speaking out of frustration, but he says, "Perfect. You show me something that's perfect, I'll show you something that's not." I thought that was really good, because what it recognizes is that the things or the events or the people that we want to make perfect, when we really look at what perfect is, we find it really isn't perfect.
Sure.
And so that raises the question, well, why are we aiming at perfect?
Why do we think we got to be connected to source? And why don't we just learn to accept that everything's conditional and everything is going to diminish and decline or change or otherwise not please us eventually? Because I look at that in my relationship, when I'm hooking up with someone at my age, we're basically what we're agreeing to if we're in a relationship is we're going to watch each other age incredibly in the next 10 years, because I'm almost 70 and she is 70. Going from 70 to 80 is quite a ride, and then 80 to 90, forget about it, and so I'm thinking, so talk about conditional. If I'm really digging the fact that, her beauty and that I better find that inner beauty. I better really find my connection to source in this relationship, because it's things on the outside are going to change a lot.
Mm-hmm.
This is when people fall and break hips. This is when people, just all kinds of things happen. The skin really starts sagging. Everything starts changing to such a degree that, you start realizing this is what old looks like. This is what old feels like.
And yet we also know that it doesn't necessarily.
No. And in fact, that's why I'm so keen on this thing of looking through the eyes of source. How does source see her? How does source see me? Well, as perfect. Well, what does that mean? It means that in my mind, it's like I'm aligning with this energy of that, creates everything, that makes everything what it is in this world. But there's something so beautiful about all that it can take one's focus off conditions, and less have angst about the fact that the conditions are changing.
Well, that's why I was talking about the word perfect, because
Mm-hmm.
I honestly don't believe that perfect is the same thing as in alignment. I think actually it's the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when we say that we want something to be perfect, what we're really doing is saying we want to apply the ultimate extreme example of conditionality to our love.
Well,
And because of that, I think we end up trapping ourselves. We end up creating an endless series of losses because we never reach perfection. Whereas if we turn the whole concept around and say, well, instead of perfection, what I want is acceptance.
mm-hmm.
And I'm going to treat acceptance as if it were perfection, perhaps.
Hmm.
Or my idealized version of perfection. Well, then acceptance becomes an easy standard to hit, comparatively speaking, because at least that one I can reach. Perfection, I can't even reach it because it changes moment to moment. As soon as I start to zero in on it and focus in on it, all of a sudden it morphs into something else, and I have to go focus in on that, and then it morphs into something else. And I have to go. I mean, it never stays perfect. Perfect never stays perfect.
Right, if you're talking about it conditionally, but I'm talking about an unconditional perfection. Like does source see everybody in the supermarket when you walk in there as perfect? I think so, but there's nothing about anybody's single body in that whole store or their mind or their emotions, anything. If you were to tap into every single person in that store, who you could say externally, conditionally is perfect, but in the eyes of source, every single one of them is perfect. So for me, it's like looking to see through the eyes of source. And if I'm feeling that alignment inside myself, like if I sit and meditate in the morning and then I go over to the store, there's more potential if I'm feeling really good that I really will see deeper into those human beings or feel deeper into what that perfection really is. Do you know
Well,
what I'm saying?
I do, but that's why I say I prefer the word acceptance rather than perfection.
Okay.
Because with acceptance, I don't have to. It's not my responsibility for the other person to be without physical flaw.
Yeah, but I'm not expecting anything to be without physical flaw. I'm
Well,
expecting that there's
in some ways
inner
you are. I mean, when you're asking for even an unconditional perfection, you are asking for a certain idea of flawlessness. I mean, that's what perfection usually means to people, an idea of flawlessness.
Okay. So you're saying that, okay, let's say somebody's 200 pounds overweight, or they weigh 300 pounds and they can barely walk, but they're in the store buying their food, and you look at them and you say that person is perfect, but what you're wanting to say is I can totally accept that person the way they are.
Not only can I accept that person the way they are, but I can accept the statuesque Barbie doll the way she is, even if she's got a little tiny flaw on her skin. See, that's the thing. The acceptance has nothing to do with the flaws. The acceptance has to do with, first of all, we are all source energy. We are all, in that sense, I guess you could call that perfect. Personally, I don't like the idea of calling that perfect. I just think of that as source energy. That's like the source of everything. So is that perfect? I guess so, sure, okay. But that's really not the way I think about it. I think about it as just that's what it is. It's source energy. It's the creative force. It's love. It's all the good things in life, and I don't really need that to be perfect. It just is what it is, and I like what it is. And that's all I really need. I just like it. And I think the way Source looks at that 200 pound overweight person, I don't think that they miss the fact that they're 200 pounds overweight. I don't think Source ignores that part. I think that they simply accept it. From Source's point of view, all of us die. Now, Source also knows that it isn't a permanent ending. It's just a physical death. But nevertheless, from Source's viewpoint, we all die. And Source is okay with that because they are okay with us. Source energy and source beings, non-physical beings, are perfectly okay with us, even though we're doing something that we don't really want to do. We're aging and dying. Okay, we don't really want to do that, but you know what? Source is still okay with us. That's the true unconditional nature of it. It's not about whether or not, oh my God, he's dying. Oh no. Oh my God, he's putting on weight. Oh my God, he's getting sick. Oh my God, this. It's never that.
Right.
Never that at all.
It's not the oh my God.
No.
Yeah, because they're not focused conditionally and expecting the conditions to always line up with some ideal of
and yet simultaneously they also accept that part of the person. That's why I say it's about acceptance. Just being willing to accept them the way they are and love them and know perfectly well that any physical death they go through is temporary. It's just like, that's just one little thing that happened, but they go on and they go on in their infinite source energy splendor.
Yeah. And I think one thing I deal with is the angst around the changes as they take place. I was talking with my partner over the weekend about, when somebody loses a loved one, there is, in a way, it's just the person just made their transition and there's nothing wrong with, as Abraham says, croaking, because
I love the word too.
They like it to be as disrespectful as possible because they want us to understand there's nothing wrong at all with dying. It's like it's completely just a normal process. In fact, they said celebrate it. It's something to be celebrated.
I agree with them. In fact, the first time I heard that, like everybody else, I was a little shocked, but I also waited for the other shoe to drop to find out what they meant. And when I found out what they meant, I said, yeah, absolutely. I agree. Let's do it.
And yet my partner was pointing out, you just can't deny that if you're in love with someone, you feel a great affection for them. You've had great experiences with them. It means a tremendous amount to you. Then when that person suddenly goes away, that you don't necessarily sit there and celebrate. Like sometimes people just feel they have to feel the loss. And so I don't know. The point I guess I was trying to make is something about what that's conditional, but it completely makes sense. And I guess the point I was making is that as I watch my partner age, for example, or watch myself age, there's a conditionality that I feel around it, that I feel angst or dis-ease or otherwise sad and disappointed to be losing some of the youthfulness that I had. And of course, old age proposes you're going to maybe have to eat that entire donut because you're going to be more and more seen that, you're not what you used to be. And are you into that acceptance of it all? Is it, can you be in that place the way Source sees it? And I like the word acceptance. I mean, that's the thing, but also to see that it's just, there's a divine beauty to the whole process. There's something about the whole thing that was created from a place of true wisdom. And that it isn't just a screw up that we get old and that we have to lose all these functions that we had. And that's just a real unfortunate thing. I don't want to see it that way. I want to see the beauty in it somehow. I want to see how this is really, really cool that my partner is no longer going to look really as beautiful as she used to look. And, something's really beautiful about that. The only way I'm going to see that is if I'm in this place where I can somehow make it irrelevant that she's aging and make what's relevant to me this being that's living inside her body, this incredible being of light that's still speaking to me and communicating with me. And of course, if that being of light then ends up with dementia, then it's a whole other, then I can't speak with her.
Well, I think the core of this is where are you going to focus your attention? And the
Exactly.
recognition that we are not tied down in the chair that I kind of referred to metaphorically, where our head is fixed in position and our eyelids are fixed open and our eyes are pointed in one direction. We're not allowed to look anywhere else. Because that's not the way it actually is. We
Right.
do get to decide what we're going to focus our attention on. We do get to decide what we're going to think about the most, second most, third most, and so on and so forth. We get to decide that day by day, minute by minute, second by second, moment by moment.
Mm-hmm.
And because that decision is up to us at all times, then the way I look at it is it's really up to me whether I focus on the decay or not. It's completely up to me. Where am I going to focus my attention? Am I going to stay, by default, attached to this thing that I don't want and that I don't like, or am I going to focus my attention somewhere else? I mean, you just described. There's the other thing you could be focusing your attention on: the fact that she is a being of light, just like you are. Which one are you going to focus on?
Yeah.
The one good thing about being a human, a physical human, we can only focus on one thing at a time. We can multitask, we can rapidly switch back and forth, but at any given instant in time, we can only focus on one thing. That's a great thing to take advantage of.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we take advantage of it, we can literally decide where we're going to focus our attention, and in doing so, we have a different experience of it.
Yeah, and I think the thing for me is to get good at doing that to the point that I
Me
really
too.
believe that the focus that I'm switching to is attainable, and that the condition that I'm struggling against is the condition that I can let go of.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, I was just thinking in my car, I got two little dents that just occurred in this newer car I just bought, and
Ding
you know
ding.
they're both these little dings are both on a crease, so they can't be taken out easily. You know, you'd have to literally redo the door
Mm.
to get these two little dents out, and they're pretty small. But you know, in a car that was brand new, it's like the first little dents are kind of weird, and it's a good example to me of how strong I've let my mind be on conditions, because to the degree to which those little dents bother me, it's to me that's a sign of being focused on the wrong thing, because the
It's
whole
a good
rest of the
point.
car
It's
is
a really good
perfect.
point. It's a very good point, and I'm glad you brought it up because you just reinforced for me that I'm getting better at not paying attention to the dings.
Hmm.
I mean, if you ask me right now how many dings does my car have, and I have a lease. My car is a year old, so
Oh,
I'm 1 year into the lease, and if you ask me how many dings it has, I couldn't tell you.
hmm.
I mean, it probably does. I don't know. I just don't look for it.
Yeah, right.
I literally don't pay attention. I mean,
Yeah.
I've there have been times where I remember walking up to the car at one point and seeing something on the door, and I would just rub my finger against it just to see if it was a ding or dirt or something like that, and it turned out to be dirt, and
Yeah.
so I knew, okay, well, that's not a ding, and
Hmm.
then I stopped thinking about it.
Hmm.
And I'd be willing to bet that if I went to look at that car, there probably maybe one or two dings on there, but I don't know where they are.
Hmm.
And in
Hmm.
fact, because I don't know where they are, now here's an interesting question for you. Because I don't know where they are, do they remain there?
Right. Exactly.
And I don't know the answer to that one. I
Yeah.
mean,
Oh, yeah. Right.
theoretically, maybe not. Maybe the universe can, in a sense, reshape the car the way I'm thinking about it, because that's certainly what we're taught.
Well, it's certainly true that if someone is in the lane next to you and they pull up to the stoplight and their consciousness is admiring all the beautiful aspects of your car, or they don't care, then they might not see dents even if there's some
Mm-hmm.
there. You
Yeah.
know, we can overlook it. I've done that. I've really noticed that when I've gone out to buy a car, how if I'm in an excited place where I just want to get a car and I see one and I think this could really work out, and I go look at it, how many times I've bought a car like that. And it's not until I've had it home for several months that I start seeing something else that was actually had to be there when I bought it, but I didn't see it,
Mm-hmm.
because I say it's a used car. And I remember I bought one a couple years ago, and it had this definite dent in the back lift gate of this van. And I didn't see that until about a month after I owned it. And I said, that had to have been there. but I was so overlooking it because I wanted this van and I wanted it to be okay. And this dent should not have been, it should have been fixed before it was sold to me. But
Well, the car that I previously had was also a lease. And after the lease period was up, I took it in because you go to turn it in, right? And they send some guy to check it over. And he checked it over. And when I saw the final report, it had like 4 or 5 flaws in it. And when I looked at the report, I said, where? That was literally, that was my reaction. I don't remember any flaws. I thought the car was in perfect shape. I didn't see flaws. And as I thought back, now I didn't really check it over carefully, so they may have been there, but they weren't major at all. I can tell you that they were real. They had to be almost microscopic because, in my mind, they just weren't even there. And indeed, if I had gone over it with the guy and he had pointed at stuff, I could have said, "Oh yeah, I can see a little thing there." That's what it would have been. Now, from their perspective, they're trying to find every little ding possible. Which is really ironic because you got to have some pretty serious stuff before they even charge you for anything. But nevertheless, they have to go through that exercise of finding every little tiny flaw that they can find. And I think to myself, what a miserable job that must be.
Oh yeah,
the person who's the ding checker.
Yeah. Well,
all
now
he's doing is looking for flaws all day long.
Now you know how I feel coming from being raised by a parent who always pointed out the external dings and everything, and always talked about external perfection, especially in other human beings, like expecting, like everyone who would come on the TV, my mother would comment about, oh, look at how big her lips are, kids, or, oh, it's too bad that she's overweight, or why would she wear her hair like that, or gosh, her makeup is so beautiful. Oh, what a beautiful woman she is. And I look at women pretty much through my mother's eyes, like constantly, so every woman that falls under my gaze is being scrutinized, and I hate it. I mean, part of me likes it because then I like when I see the beauty, but part of me doesn't like it because then when I see the things that aren't beautiful, it's very unpleasant for me. And yet I'm working with that. I'm literally working with that part of myself to say, dang, like, how can I just ease off of that, make that irrelevant, and make my connection to source be the only thing that's relevant? Because I can't get love from how that woman looks. I can't get love from if my car is perfect or not. I can't get, my day is not going to be better if those dings in my door get fixed.
That's true. Yeah.
Because that's just an external support making me feel like now I won't be judged or something as having a funky car, or, or I won't judge myself as less than because my car is not as good as I think it should be. But there's a lot in the world and media and everything that have taught us, look for external perfection, look for things to be really, really good on the outside. And
it's almost like we need to have an alternative to the media, alternative to typical life experience doctor in the old doctor joke. Doctor, it hurts whenever I raise my arm. And the doctor says, well, don't raise your arm.
Yeah.
So doctor, it drives me crazy whenever I'm looking at all the flaws and imperfections of the world. And the doctor says, well, stop looking at all the flaws and imperfections of the world.
Yeah. Start looking at something else.
Look at anything else.
Or change your attitude. I mean, that's what it's going to say. Change your attitude. I mean, I was helping my partner make her bed the other day, and I was, and she has this thing about how the bed has to be, So, it has to be, the sheets underneath have to be just right before you put on the next sheet, and then you put on the top sheet, and then it gets brought to a certain position on the bed, and then when the pillows are put on, they have to be in a certain way to where the pillowcases face a certain way out, and then anyway, by the time the whole thing's made, it looks really good, right?
I'm sure, yeah.
And I was almost said to her the other day, I said, now, what time did the bed police show up, to evaluate your bed? Because it's like, give me a break. I mean, I like the way it looks. And so there is that too, and I will, if I walk in somebody's bathroom and there's hair in the sink, it's like, it's like, that's kind of funky, but do I expect them to clean out every single hair in the sink? Well, I guess so. But do I do that when somebody comes to my house? And so it's like perfection looking for external conditions to make me happy is
Well, you're making an interesting point here. I don't know if you realize the point that you're making completely. Because
no, probably not. I'm
Isn't
not
that
as
the way-
smart as you, Walt. No.
Oh, yes, you are. You're much smarter. But the
Oh, thank
fact
you.
is, when we look, what you're saying here is a very nicely laid out description of how we look at perfection. Perfection is about finding and failing to successfully find flaws.
Perfection is failing to successfully find flaws.
Right?
Yeah.
Because that's what you just described, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I know the flaws are there. What am I going to do about the flaws? Am I going to do something about it, in which case it looks great? Or am I not going to do anything about it, in which case I'm a sucky person? It's all about the flaws. So here we have this vague thing known as perfection that we're aiming at. And what do we think about? We think about the flaws. Well,
right.
There's something wrong. There's a flaw in this logic.
Yeah, well, it's judged that perfection is incredibly personal, subjective thing, because some person could walk in my house. I've been having my house ready for showings, because this condo is being sold. Actually, it just got sold, and it's like, and so the owner came in and walked me through the whole place, saying how she would like it to look for the showings. And so, since she's been such a great landlord, I made the house for every showing look exactly the way she wanted it to look. But I was thinking that subjective way that we make that her and I made the house look could be not look that good to somebody else, and to other people it might look like over the top, like, wow, what did they do to this place? It looks like a showroom.
That's the danger to being focused on perfection, in my view, because when we talk about perfection, we usually think of it as an objective thing, which, by the way, doesn't exist. I've come to the conclusion that objectivity does not exist. We like to think that it does, but it really doesn't.
I agree.
Okay, but nevertheless, we look at this. You just described it very nicely. We look at this situation as, well, my perfection may not be their perfection. From an objective viewpoint, their perfection doesn't really match up with mine. And my reaction is bullshit. I'm sorry, but that's just another way of justifying looking for flaws into perfection. It just doesn't work. You can't find that's why perfection is really not a good thing to look for, I don't think, because the only way to get there is by looking for flaws. And so you're spending all your time looking at the things that you don't want. Well, how can you possibly win that way? The law of attraction teaches us very clearly you can't. You can't win by doing that. You're going to only get more opportunities to see flaws. You're not going to ever leave the frustration behind. The frustration is always going to be there because you're always looking for flaws. It gets to the point where I ask myself, why would anyone want to bother with perfection? Because it seems pointless. Well, actually, it does seem to have a point. It's a point I don't like.
But it's always a subjective thing.
Well, not just that it's subjective, it's leading me to a path where all I find is flaws. Just because I have this fixation on perfection. I really think it's counterproductive to want to think about perfection in any way.
Cool. Yeah, it's like I noticed that in the Abraham stuff that they always talk about perfection, how Source sees things, and it helps me, I guess, at least to use that word, like when I think about my partner or anybody that if I'm being critical about somebody, it's like, and I remind myself that's not how Source sees this person. That's not how Source sees the situation. They see it through eyes of the fact that everything is working exactly as it's supposed to work. Everything is appearing exactly as it's meant to appear. And it's just that, can you see it through their eyes? And maybe.
And I think that when they look through their eyes, they're not looking from their perspective at perfection. I don't think that source energy and non-physical beings ever look at perfection. I really don't.
Yeah, they look at just what is.
Oh, I think they look at what is and what can be, and what they love about what they're seeing, what they're experiencing, what they're interacting with.
What is.
Yeah, they're not saying, well, it's not perfect yet, because they understand at perhaps at an intuitive level, or maybe just at a conscious level. They understand that the search for perfection is the search for flaws.
Well, okay. I don't know what to do with that. But okay, that's cool.
For me, what I do with it is I say I'm done with perfection.
Hmm.
I really don't want to have to mess around with perfection anymore. There's just too much fire there.
Yeah.
Too much
Yeah.
pain, too much frustration, too much angst.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Maybe that's the
I
lesson
mean, my wife isn't much of a bed maker either, but let's say my wife was a bed maker, like your partner is. My reaction would be, have fun. And by the way, I like the result.
Hmm. But you're not going to help.
Well, I may even help if she asks for help, but
Hmm.
I'm not going to be fixated on it.
Right. And afraid that you're going to displease her if your bed's not made perfect.
Not going to fixate on that either, because she is satisfying her need. And if she
Yeah.
wants my help to satisfy her need, yeah, I'm willing to help her. I won't do it for her.
Hmm.
But
And if she,
but if she's making the bed and she says, "Could you help me with this?" I'll say, "Sure, yeah, no problem,"
right.
because I want to help her. I don't want to do for her. I want to help her.
But if she has angst around, like I know a couple who the husband loves to wear really funky jeans and flannel shirts and old sneakers, and he's a multimillionaire. And she wants him to dress in really fine loafers and great slacks and really fancy shirts from the expensive men's stores. And and it's sort of like, and that's the way the whole house goes. In other words, if he takes off a piece of clothing in the den, it stays in the den. It doesn't get hung up in his closet. And things like that. And so they've been together now for 30 years or so. And yet there's still that angst, I believe. I don't know. I don't hang out with them, but I saw it for years, the angst that she would go through around his ease around how everything should be, and her perfection, wanting to have their mansion be perfect. Every single thing that she buys from France and Italy and has shipped over and puts in this perfect house is in the perfect spot, perfectly dusted, perfectly taken care of 24/7. And then she has this husband who walks around and creates imperfection throughout the whole house.
And she keeps attracting that.
And she keeps attracting that. And he's attracting somebody who feels the opposite of how he wants to live.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've seen this whole marriage be this thing of this struggle between them, of this battle between her wanting things to be a certain way and him wanting it to be a certain way.
And
And so
interestingly enough, neither one is willing to accept the other on this point.
yeah, I don't know how it is now, but yes, back then, I mean, I don't know how they worked it out. Somehow they did make it work, because most of the time the house looked perfect, and somehow he must have been controlling his tendencies to some degree. But
But she was also setting herself up. I mean, if she was saying, in effect, I want this house to be perfect, and every time you make the house not perfect, you are hurting me, she was setting herself up. I mean, she was setting him up too. It was both, but primarily she was setting herself up for failure. She was setting herself up for disappointment.
Sure. But then my question is, what do two people like that do? Because, there's this thing in relationship.
What is it they want to do? Where do they want to go?
Right. Well,
that's really the more important question. I mean, you see questions online. You see them on Facebook a lot. I've been attracting, and I saw one just like this. I was trying so hard to attract my perfect soulmate, and I got him, and I attracted him, and now he's ignoring me, and he's treating me badly, and blah, blah, blah. All this bad stuff is happening. What do I do? And I have a number of reactions when I see those. One of those reactions is, what do you want to do? Because they never define that. That's the interesting thing. They won't tell you what they want. They won't tell you what they want to be different. It's like, well, it should be obvious what I want. Well, it's not obvious at all. Actually, you could have 3 or 4 different kinds of reactions to that, maybe more. But they think, from their perspective, that there's really only the one, and that's the one that they're having, and everybody should know that. And there's a built-in, talk about flaws, there's a built-in flaw in that logic, isn't there? Because it basically says my perspective is everyone's perspective. The way I experience this is the way everyone experiences it. And therefore, if somebody is interfering with my experience of it, it means they are the cause of my perspective shift. No, they're not the cause of anything like that. We're the only ones that cause our own perspective shifts.
Mm-hmm. So what is this thing of compromise? Like do you compromise in your relationship?
Never.
Because huh?
Never.
Okay, so
Louise and I never compromise.
uh,
Compromise is not needed. Because compromise, when you really come down to it, is I will suffer this way if you will suffer that way.
mhm. Like in
And,
other words,
and we just refuse to
I'll,
do that.
I'll put up with helping you make the bed every morning, even though I don't want it perfect. I don't want it to look like this necessarily. It doesn't really matter to me if it's just a sheet thrown over the top of the bed. But if you want to have the sheet and the blanket and the three pillows and the perfect spread and everything folded exactly the way it's supposed to be, and then all creases taken out of the spread, um, I'll help you do that every morning. I'll compromise and help you.
That's actually
Now,
much more detailed than the way we do it. That has such a level of detail that the detail is all about I want to manipulate it my way. We don't even go there. Where we leave it is if you want the bed to be that way, more power to you. Just don't
mhm.
expect that I exist in order to satisfy your needs. That's not my purpose in this relationship, and
But
vice
would you
versa.
help her every morning and compromise the fact that you'd rather be in the other room reading something, but yet you're going to help her get
Not
the
out of
bed
her
perfect?
expectation.
Hmm.
Not out of expectation.
Only if you felt
If I want
comfortable.
to give it to her, then I give it to her. And similarly, she does the same thing with me.
Hmm.
This is why I say there's really no such thing as compromise in a healthy relationship. In a healthy
Hmm.
relationship, we don't we don't have each other in a half Nelson on various things. That's what
Right.
compromise is about: trying to get the other person into a half Nelson so that their behavior will make me happy. And
Hmm.
I'm willing to suffer some pain as long as they're willing to suffer some pain because that way they'll be making me happy. Interesting thing about that, they never are. People who insist that compromise has to be a part of their lives, when they look at the things that they compromise on, they're never happy about them.
Right. That's what I feel.
Yeah.
That's why I'm looking
And
as
that's
to
why I say it's a flawed
how to have
approach.
a relationship
It,
without
it,
compromise. And
to
the only way I can imagine to do it is to be able to say it's irrelevant what what's going on with her externally. What's relevant is my alignment with source. And
It's true.
if I get aligned with source, then I'm going to see her in a different way, and I'm going to see the things that she's choosing and doing in a different way.
And an
Uh,
interesting thing happens. I'm not a person who likes cleaning house at all.
mhm.
But when my wife is cleaning house, she will occasionally ask me for help. And I will, when, if I'm feeling loving toward her, then yeah, I want to help. So I'll certainly help. But most of the time, what she'll do is she'll say, well, I've got to clean this, and I got to clean that, and I got to clean that. And when she does, she's taking responsibility for what she wants to have happen. An amazing thing happens. All of a sudden, I want to help her because she isn't trying to half Nelson me into it.
Yeah.
She's just saying, this is what I want to do. This is where I want to get to. And I wanted her to feel good. So I'll help her to feel good. But it's a gift at that point. See, compromise isn't about gift. Compromise is about coerce. Gifting, giving it out of you just because you want what's good, what the other person feels is good for themselves, just because you want to help them get there where they want to be. That a true gift is voluntary. It's
Right.
voluntary. It's something that the other person didn't have to squeeze out of you in any way whatsoever. That's
Right.
so much better
Like
than compromise. So
I
much better.
hope you'll gift me with helping me clean
No,
the
no, 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 no. That's manipulating.
house.
There is no hoping. There's no, oh, please gift me. There's nothing like that.
Yeah.
There's no position of victimhood. There's no position of I am weak. You're such a strong man. Right? Nothing like that. That doesn't exist in our relationship at all. Not
Mhm.
even for a split second. We have too much respect for each other to treat each other that way. That would
Right.
be so demeaning to be treated that way.
Right. Right.
We just refuse to even go there.
Hmm.
But she gets so much more out of me because she doesn't treat me that way. And I don't treat her that way.
Yeah, that's good. I grew up where
And I get a lot out of her, by the way. It works both ways.
I learned when I was growing up to get love from my mother by being treated that way by her. Like she would
Oh, yeah.
do a victim thing really strong. Like, I'm so tired. Oh, would you
Oh,
please scrub the floor? And I go,
And the
Oh yeah,
world's
Mom.
tiniest violin is playing in the background.
Yeah, and then the amount of love she would lavish on me afterwards was the greatest love I would ever get from her. Was
Mm,
if I did something when she was telling me that she was suffering, and that would I please help her out, and then that's how she would get me
that's the
to do it,
manipulative part. Yeah.
and then I would go, well, I would start learning if I do this really, really well, I would scrub the floor better than my dad could do it, and he was really good at it because he was always helping her. Then it was like, okay, then I'm going to really get a bunch of praise, and when my dad gets home, she'll double praise me to him. So I grew up my whole childhood like doing everything from that point of view. Like I'm doing this to, I don't really want to be doing this, but this is the only way out I get, the strokes I want to get from my parents is I,
And of course, those strokes felt transient. They didn't
oh
feel
yeah, you
continuous.
always had to do it again and again and
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is the conditional side.
Mhm. Yeah. So I spent my adult life, like all the women I've been in a relationship with, I get into this thing really easily of, I'll let me go way beyond anything that I would ever want to do. And I'll do it for you because you want it and you get pleased and you give me good feedback, when I do things that please you, or even if they don't, I think that's how I'm going to get love, is if I go above and beyond the call of duty in every area and make things exceptionally, but it's not listening to my own inner needs, like how would I like it?
And it's
How
not
would I
real
like
love either. I mean, when you
No,
really come down to it, it's not love at all.
no, right. So there's conundrums that people get into around this stuff. So
Oh,
that's
God,
why
yes.
I look so strongly for what is it. That's why I come up with topics like this, because I need to know what it is to make it irrelevant about what's happening externally and make it relevant about what's happening internally, so that my inner alignment with source becomes my only, and it becomes my only salvation. In a lot of ways, right now in the relationship I'm in, I can't even imagine how I could even be in the relationship if I wasn't finding alignment with source, because externally the conditions are always changing into things that are sometimes pleasing, sometimes not pleasing. And that's the nature of the external world. But I know I've got to find my rock, my bedrock, my connection to source inside myself, so that if my partner does and says things that are freaking me out, or appears a certain way that's freaking me out, that I don't let it freak me out. I go, no, I know what it feels like to be connected to this love, to this beauty, to this feeling inside myself, of being
Absolutely.
connected to source. And
Yep.
it's the most magnificent thing to try to imagine what is being connected to source.
Well, yeah, that's it. That's who we are. Who is the us? That's part of what we're trying to learn as we're doing the connecting. By the way, speaking of connection, I want to encourage those listeners. First of all, I want to thank those listeners who are subscribers. And we know how many of you there are because we see how many podcasts you guys download every month. It's fantastic. But for those who are new to the podcast and haven't heard it before, we want to encourage you, take a moment and become a subscriber. Join the club, so to speak. It's really easy to do. You just go to the homepage of a website. Our website is loatoday.net. The instructions are right there just below the player where you can listen to the live broadcast, in addition to listening to the recorded podcast. And when you do it, it takes about a minute to do. It's free, and when you're all done, you get the constant stream. Every time that we put out a new episode, it comes flowing right to your smartphone or to your tablet or whatever device you're using, so you can play them anytime you want to. Plus, we do encourage you to listen to the live broadcast on the homepage. We're liking the fact that more and more people are doing that. So please subscribe, share the fact that you did, and occasionally tune in, listen to us live. Maybe even call us. That'd be really fun sometime. Mm-hmm. And Tom, for somebody who's looking for a little personal coaching, you're a professional coach. How do they reach out to you?
I offer a free half-hour coaching session, and it's a way that I determine if I want to work with somebody, and someone can determine if they want to work with me. And they go to my website, which is youarejoy, the three words youarejoy.com, and you can sign up there. It's in the menu bar, how to sign up for a free half hour with me.
All right. There we go. So, Tom, it's been a pleasure. I look forward to talking to you on Friday.
Yeah, me too, Walt.
And we'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.